just to kick it off, Fernando, so this work is about the Firebird. It's part of the title, and you can see in some of the imagery and the dance movements, you're alluding to this creature. Could you tell us more about the Firebird?
Yes, sure. First of all, thanks for everybody that came. Thank you, Sarah, for organizing the event. And I want to thank also Dan Schiffman, who designed the fractal tree that I'm using in this work. And also Mimi Y and Dan Schiffman again, the coding frame, who helped me with the code of the work. And again, thank everyone that came. I'm going to share again my screen because I prefer to speak from the perspective of the Firebird.
Excellent. We'll give you a few minutes to work on that. I see we've got a couple questions in the chat. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. Anything you want to ask, you can bring it up.
Cool. So, do you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So, the story of the Firebird. The story of the Firebird is divided in 3 parts, and they work as a kind of triangular base for me to develop the code and the choreography that actually tell the story with a more like fractal and a less linear approach. So in chapter 1, the Firebird used to live in a wet forest with their community. One day, without previous notice, their house was put on fire by someone who couldn't understand the way they were living. Chapter 2, the Firebird, while carrying an invisible fire seed in their belly, migrates to the city in the north alone and finds a place to sleep where no human could find them. Chapter 3, in the place where they slept, they dreamed for so long that the invisible seed that was inside of their belly finds time to germinate and turns into a tree. That's basically the story.
Great. Thank you so much. And so this is clearly a mix of your performance, so your body, and also this technology that is kind of dancing with you. But you're talking about this kind of natural story. So do you see that the technology and the Firebird, which is a creature that, the story of a creature that lives in nature, do you see them as very intertwined, or is it just a method of telling the story?
Yeah. Well, I prefer to like kind of operate a perspective where technology and this that you're calling the natural world are not separated by a binary system. Of course, this implies a lot of contradictions, and I like to inhabit these contradictions because the system where with which we are interacting was not like designed from this perspective. And so somehow when I choose to collaborate with digital technology, I do it because I believe that it may help us to understand our bodies and the ecosystem that we inhabit. And also like all the social labor and social divisions that are implied in the process of fabrication of all these devices that we are using. So yeah, somehow this work is like requiring me to get intimate to an algorithm that I designed myself, and to get intimate in a way that it starts to inhabit my body as this kind of strange, or as a kind of spectral presence that is this mythology that I'm working with. So somehow I'm creating this dialogue with this entity that appeared to me through this kind of ritualistic algorithm.
Wow.
Did I answer your question?
Yes. That's interesting. It's such a way that I never think of technology kind of as almost like a spiritual vessel for a story. I think there's a question in the chat that relates to this. Someone asked, what did you use to visualize the movements?
To visualize?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm seeing myself on the screen all the time. I'm sharing my screen with you. This is all made in the browser using like beginner-friendly libraries. It's all open source, which I think it's a very important part of the ethos of this work for me. And so I just share my screen and I watch the browser on my screen, and that kinds of changes a lot like my state of presence, you know, because I'm actually like watching myself interact with the graphics.
That's so interesting. And that it seems like something that comes from working with Zoom, which maybe was not your original conception of this project. I mean, I know you were working on this past spring and the pandemic hit. So I'm wondering, has the project shifted now that you're kind of in this format of Zoom? We're all using Zoom now for various things. Or did it kind of, were you kind of expecting this to be part of the experience?
Yeah, so I've been creating this work in a learning environment during my master at ITP, at the Interactive Telecommunications Program at TISH NYU. And so I'm basically combining different elements of this past semester in different classes such as Nature of Code, Code and Choreography, and Experiments in Augmented Reality to create this piece. Before the lockdown, the idea for this class called Code and Choreography was to create a group piece for a studio space with interactive video projections, Kinect, etc. But after the lockdown, we had to start to think about the online as a space, as a performative space. And so this changed a lot the approach to this, to the process of creation of this piece. And also like quarantine put me in a much more solitary mood and forced me to create with the equipment that I had at home. Which is basically my computer and a webcam and my beginner programming skills and my body. And all of those elements kind of were the ground for this online performance to be created in the way it is now. And although I'm like very interested in live performance outside of the web as well, this process made me start imagining some online and long distance performative potentials that I'm very interested in developing further.
Yeah. It's interesting that you were speaking a little bit about kind of the pitfalls in technology, kind of the populations that are used to extract materials to make these technologies, and like how that's very exploitive, but it's also very democratizing. So even though not all of us are in Brooklyn right now, we can see you perform, which is pretty amazing. So the technology can also be a great like equalizer and sharer of experiences, which is interesting that there's both in this work.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's a question here. How did the technology you're working with influence the way you choreographed this piece?
Well, in a lot of ways, as I said before, I feel that I'm still working to embody the algorithm that I've been creating. But of course, it's not like a dialogue just in one direction. I'm dialoguing with the algorithm and changing it all the time. Sometimes I discover something in my body and try to translate it to the algorithm. And sometimes it's the other way around. I find like technical limits or technical potentials, and that makes me change the choreography. So I actually think that one of the cores of this work is like me rediscovering my body from top the webcam, which is um, a very like important process in the story of how I relate to the computer, to my computer in an intimate space. Um, yeah, but Sarah, as you said about the potentials of performing digitally, I think it's always super contradictory, as I said, working with technology, and especially if we're interested in having like a critical point of view. And there is something very specific about performing online, which is like one of the main reasons why I love performing is that because it it is not just an audiovisual experience, you know, but an encounter with all the senses and abstraction that interacting with a human body in person implies. So I really miss it, but like it's not possible to look into your eyes right now. I just see like representations of you guys, and I don't feel your vibrancy. I don't feel like your bodies, or I do, but in a very different way, you know, because this space is making it possible for us to, for all of us to be together here. And that's also very special, you know, especially like in a world with closed borders and all the limitations that we are dealing with. So yeah, I'm very glad to be here at the same time and sharing this time and space with you all and connecting our virtual bodies somehow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Speaking of other bodies, there were a few bodies in the background. You're outside. Did
Yeah,
performing for them, but them maybe not knowing that you were performing for us, did that change anything for you?
I felt that the performance kind of moved the space, and I really enjoy when I feel that. This is not my first time performing on public space, and I really like appreciate the random interferences, the random presences of performing outside. This just added to the performance, and it made me think a lot about other potentials of these interactive graphics that I'm using. It can also be in a much more collective and playful atmosphere for sure. I would be very happy to see other people playing with the digital mask of the Firebird.
Yeah, someday. That would be so great.
Yeah.
We can take a few more questions, and I'll also leave the meeting open. Fernando can keep answering questions if you have them. Someone's asking about the music.
Oh yeah, this is a very important point because this is an ongoing process, and I'm using this music by Caetano Veloso, which is a Brazilian, a very, very well-known Brazilian musician. I'm playing two songs from his album called Araçá Azul, which was made in the 70s. I love this album, but this might be provisory. I think like the next step for this project is developing an original soundtrack, and I'm also very interested in working with sound reactive graphics and spatial sound. So yeah.
Wow, we can't wait. We'll have to have another performance.
Yeah, for sure. Please. I'd love to.